Curtis A reached out to me, said make a theme song for my show. Said alright, just give me all the details, man. And my homie says he don't know. Well, if you're gonna pay me big bucks, cause I might should have something to say. He said, you know what I bring, I'm the customizing king, nothing else matters anyway. So is he gonna have guests? I don't know. Is he gonna go live? I don't know. What time will it be? What will you see? I'm pretty much in the dark, but I can guarantee he'll be customizing action figures, getting paint all on his fingers. It's art by Akerman. It's art by Akerman. Tips and tricks and conversation, sharing his gift with every nation. It's art by Akerman. Art by Akerman. You best get ready, cause now it's time for Art by Akerman.
Okay, we're back. We're now going to take a look at some human eyes. I'm going to flip my wet palette over and get some new colors on here. We're going to start with some skin tone around it. I'm going to go with this Mornfang brown. So let me apply some of that on here. Get a little bit more. And let's see, then we're going to go with a titanium white for the eyes. And going to add just a little bit of this fluorescent violet with it. I'll put this separately because I only need a really tiny amount of that. And I think that should be good for right now. All right, so starting out, I'm just going to work on some of these skin tones. So I'm going to mix some of this black in with the Mornfang brown to get like the overall skin tone that I'm going for. I want it a little bit darker than this. Kind of going for like maybe like a milk chocolate look. Okay, that looks pretty good for my base skin tone. And this isn't, you know, I mean, this isn't really a skin tone tutorial, but a lot of this when you're doing eyes has to do with touching up the eyelids and stuff too. So you kind of, it becomes an important part of here. So I'm just going to apply some of this on here. To get kind of a basic skin tone down. And then once I've done that, I will be back and we'll start working on the eyes. Okay, so now that I've got my, you know, basic skin tone down, I'm gonna start working on what we would call the whites of the eyes. You can see that my skin tone has gone into the eye itself. Not a big deal because we're gonna be touching that up anyway. So I'm going to take a little bit of this fluorescent purple, just the tiniest amount, and apply it with this white. You'll see as I start to do it initially, like it becomes kind of pinkish. That's a little too much, but as we add more white, that'll tone down a little bit. And just become more of this kind of off-white color. Now, if that color isn't exactly what you're looking for, you could always add a different, you could add some brown, some blue, some whatever. I feel like this is pretty good. I might add just a little tiny bit of blue to this. This is just a Patholo blue from So Flat. And I'm just gonna once again grab a tiny bit of it and add that in there. Okay, I feel like this is kind of the color that we were going for here. It's a little bit of an off-white. We're now going to color the inside, the whites of the eyes with this. And once again, if we go a little bit over into the eyelid, that's fine, but we want to claim that space. That space for the eye is our space. And we don't want that taken over by the skin tone, by the eyelid itself. Eyelid needs to back off and give us our eye space. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll paint both of these up with this off-white that I put together, and then I will be right back. Okay, so now I have claimed the white parts of my eye. We've taken that space back from the eyelids itself and the skin tone, and we're going to start working on the iris. So this is where I would normally kind of, with a micro pen, draw in the circle. We don't need to do that. We're just going to go ahead and paint it in because we're dealing with a bigger surface here. And so I'm just going to take the black and I'm going to make my my iris. So just start working on that. And, you know, as I've said before, like if I mess up to the inside here, on this part to the inside, I don't care because I'm going to fill in the whole inside. But I don't want to mess up the outside because I don't want to have to repaint that lighter color. It's much harder to cover over a dark color with light than vice versa. So, but I'm just kind of trying to make my shape of my eye here, of the iris. And normally I'd be kind of sketching this in with the micro pen first and then painting it in after. So then once I've kind of done that, I'll take a look and make sure that the shape is the way that I want to. So if like this one looks a little skinnier and taller, this one looks shorter and fatter, and I'm just trying to even these out and make them look more the same. So I'm just going to kind of adjust the size of this real quick and make sure that they're more symmetrical, and then I will be right back. Okay, so now I've kind of made those a little bit more symmetrical. I'm going to go ahead and start applying the color of the iris. This is the black circle around the edge is gonna remain as the outline of the iris. So for color, I think I'm gonna use, I think I'm gonna do green eyes. So I think I will start with this dark green, and I will use some of this permanent green for some highlights on it. So you start with this. And then add a little bit of this permanent green here for the lower part. And I can see the black is still a little wet on this, so I'm gonna let that dry real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, getting ready to start working on the green for this iris. So I'm gonna start with the top here. And once again, I'm leaving a ring of black around it, but I'm filling everything else in. So now as you're working on a 3D printed head or an action figure, you're not going to have near this much room. So a lot of this is just going to be kind of like, you know, circle and then kind of a dot. And then you're making the dot bigger and bigger until you fill in all of that space except for that black ring that we're talking about. So there's that one. We'll work on the other one. Okay, so once I've kind of painted in that color, this is where I'll now add some of a lighter color on the bottom part. Because remember, there's, you know, light. If you assume this person is, you know, standing straight up, there's light coming down. It hits their eyebrow ridge and eyelid, and it's going to block some of that light getting to the eyeball. So the top parts of the pupil are going to be darker than the lower parts of the pupil. I don't want it to be significantly lighter underneath, but I want it to be lighter. So I'm going to take some of this permanent green and mix it with this dark green that we were using to come up with a little bit lighter color. And then once you've got the color that you're looking for, you know, I usually will test it on my thumb and then start applying it. Now, as I do this, I'm still trying to leave that black ring around the outside. I'm just coloring the bottom part of this iris in with the lighter green, just as kind of like where the light is going to be cast on it. So and depending on, you know, how you're going to have your figure pose and stuff, you could, you know, have it to where, you know, if they're at an angle where the light is kind of more diagonally, you could have them where their pupil is like looking a certain way, depending on if they're looking left or right. You know, we're not going into that right now, but just FYI, that is an option. Okay, so here we've got, you know, kind of a little bit darker up top, a little bit lighter down below. I'm going to tighten up this line a little bit on what's left of the black. Not trying to leave too much black, but enough that it outlines the iris. So and one thing that I typically don't have to worry about on a 3D sculpt that I have had happened here is I put my hand in the paint. You know, typically that's not an issue, but it is here apparently. So I'm going to touch that up a little bit and then we will be right back. Okay, so now I would work on the pupil, and for that typically I would use the micron pen like this, and I would make a dot in the middle, see where that dot's at, and then I would kind of expand it from there. So to kind of simulate what that would look like, I'm going to use this elf brush, dry brush, and kind of do something similar. We'll see how this goes. Actually, I'm going to use this this one, which is another makeup brush. I'm going to use this instead. normally it would be that micron pen, but I'm trying to simulate that size and what that would look like. So typically what that would look like is I would go to this and I would try to make a dot. Then I would come over to the other side, the other eye, and make a dot. And then I would look at them and go, okay, where are the shapes? Where are the dots at? And as I expand the dot, because I'm going to expand it to a bigger pupil, which way do I need to go? So this one looks a little bit more to the left, and this one looks a little bit more to the right. So as I expand this one, I need to move a little bit left, and as I expand this one, I need to move a little bit right. And then but I'm not going all the way. I'm just going to go a little bit more to try to get it a little bit closer to where it needs to be. And then I'm going to take a look again and see where we're at. So this would be like with a 10/0 paintbrush that I would be using right now. And I would just be kind of trying to fill that out a little bit more, okay? So then I would look at this and go, okay, what's the shape look like? Where's it at? Okay, this one's pretty centered. This one's a little centered, but it looks like it could use a little bit more going to the left. This one's not as circular, so I need to kind of tighten that up a little bit. So I'm gonna make this one, let me get a little bit more paint, move this one out this way a little bit. And then this one, I'm gonna make it look a little bit more circular because it looked kind of odd shaped. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. You know, that's really it mostly for the eye. We're gonna still do our little highlight on here, which is not a necessary part, but if you've got the space, you can go ahead and do it. So we've got the space, so we're gonna go ahead and do it. Just really depends on what sculpt you're working with, how much room you've got, that kind of thing. So what we're gonna do is, let me take a look at this real quick again. I feel like this pupil is a little bit smaller than that one. So I'm gonna try to expand that one just a little bit more. And this is absolutely not the brush I would normally be using. I would normally be using like a 10/0 because this would be super small on a sculpt. But so that's kind of what I'm looking for there. While this part dries, I don't want to put the highlight in on there yet. So I'm going to start working on the eyelid itself and work on that little dot in the corner, the kind of reddish, I guess, dot. I'm going to go ahead and use... I'm gonna use this, no, I'm not. I'm gonna use this one, cadmium red dark, and mix it with some of that original eye color. So, let me get some of this original eye color over here. And then just grab a tiny bit of this red, mix it up. So that made that pretty pink. So that's kind of what that looks like there. I could probably go a little bit more. You know what? I'm going to add some of this blue over here, just a really, really tiny bit. And maybe just a touch more of the red. Okay, let's take a look. It's a little purplish. I want a little bit more red in it. I think that's a good color. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add this to the corner here. Normally it would just be like a little dot, but because we're dealing with a bigger surface, we're gonna go ahead and paint that in. I'm gonna go a little bit over onto like the eyelid and bridge of the nose, but that's okay because I'm gonna touch that up here in a second. Okay. All right. All right. Now I'm going to work on the eyelid, on the shadow part of the eyelid. So let me get my black. And now we're going to kind of trace where normally the sculpt would be, but because we don't have a sculpt, we're going to just kind of trace where we think the eyelid should be on here. And if you cut into some of that, like the iris, that's not a big deal. You just want to try to get the right shape that you're looking for. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with the other eye. Okay, it's looking pretty good. So as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that on this iris, the outside black circle has gotten a little too thin compared to the other eye. So I'm going to try to thicken that up a little bit, which means I may have to touch back up the inside of this iris, which is not ideal, but you know, it is what it is. So just trying to tighten that back up. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now, normally, because I'd be using such a small paintbrush, if I went too far to the inside and had to redo some of that green, I would just redo some of that green. It's not the end of the world. All right, so now we've got that part done. We're gonna go ahead and do our little highlight part. So for that, we're going to get some of that original color that we used for the whites of the eyes. And we're gonna go ahead and act as if the light is coming from this direction. And so therefore it's gonna be here, and it's gonna be on the same spot over here, which you don't want, unless you have multiple light sources coming in from the figure, you don't want like a highlight here, a light point here, and then a light point on the opposite side, unless there's two different light sources. So you want to try to keep it, so like, let's say that I put the light source right there. I would want it at the same point on the other side. Or if I put it here, I would want it on the same point on that side. So we're going to go with it right here. And, you know, once again, like we talked earlier, you're kind of doing this in between the pupil and the iris, okay? And then we're gonna go over this other side and we're gonna try to get it in kind of the same direction that that's coming from. So, and you know, this is just like the spot, the pink spot kind of in the corner. This is something that you don't have to do. If you've got the space and you can do this, it does make it look nice, but it's not something you have to do. So just kind of work with the space that you've been given. So there's that part. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put in some eyebrows. We're gonna imagine that there's some sculpted eyebrows on here, and then I'll work on the, you know, tightening up that shadow on the eyelid and going from there. So. Try to get it about the same spot on this side. This one is a little lower. Just trying to get the overall shape on here first. Normally, once again, this would be a sculpted in detail, so you wouldn't have to guess where it's at. And we're going to try to make this to where it doesn't look like it's just drawn on. Now, I will say there's going to be times where you probably, hopefully you don't have a sculptor that forgot to sculpt eyebrows, but I've had it happen before. And so then you've got to kind of make do. And we'll show you kind of how you do that here in just a second. So, all right, so let's say that there's no sculptural details on here and you want this to look more, you know, like natural eyebrow hair. Typically what I'll do, I would normally use a small brush, which, you know, I'm gonna use a little bit bigger brush because we're dealing with a bigger surface, but I would take a smaller brush and I would try to do it like this, like kind of up and down, all right? And I'm mostly worried about the top part. The bottom part, I'm probably going to straighten out anyway, but the top part, I want it to look more like hairs and natural and not like a straight line. So I'm just kind of going back and forth. I don't want it to look even. I want it to be kind of choppy. Okay. Do the same thing over here. I think I might have went a little too low with this eyebrow. In fact, I know I did. I went way too low. So I'm just gonna go a little bit higher, and then what I'll do is I'll make that eyelid come up higher afterward. So let's go way up here. Once again, just kind of the dealing with no sculpt details and just trying to make do with where I think this should be. And yeah, I was quite a bit off on that. So. Okay, and I'm actually going to go a little bit lower on this eyelid too. Normally, you're just going to kind of go with what the sculpt tells you, but we don't have a sculpt here. So, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Go a little bit lower on this shadow on the eyelid. Okay. And now we're going to start tightening up some of this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the original brown that I mixed up for the skin tones. I'm going to add some more black to it and go from there. So we've taken that original color and we've darkened it up a little bit more. And now we're going to just start kind of tightening up some of this stuff here. And just coloring this between the eye and the eyebrow, and I'm going to go a little up into where I painted the eyebrow because I made it too low. This is probably not anything that you would need to worry about when you're doing it, because you're not going to have to try to figure out where to place the eyebrow, but for me, I do need to worry about it because I don't want it to look like crap when we're done, as I'm showing you kind of how to do this. But the main part on this part that you would need to know is just you're tightening up this black line here. So this black line that's the shadow, you don't want it that thick, and so you're trying to go a little bit into it to thin that black line out. And then you're coloring in the upper eyelid and making it a bit darker than the rest of the skin tone. Okay. Same thing with the sides of the nose. That's going to be a little bit darker as well. And, you know, I'm kind of guessing at that because I don't have an actual nose sculpted there, but yeah. The other thing I'll say here is just like, if you are working on a human, darker tones are a lot more forgiving than lighter tones, because you can hide more in shadows than you can with like a Caucasian skin tone. So just something to keep in mind as you're, you know, getting into it. If you immediately jump to, you know, past orcs and skeletons and all that good stuff and jump right into humans, you know, you might want to start with darker tones first before you work on the lighter tones. You're just going to have an easier time, I think. So, and I'm going to do the same thing, tightening up that bottom line, and then I'll be right back. Here's where, after I've tightened up the, you know, underneath with the eyelids, I see a spot actually under both eyes, under this one right here, and then under this one here, where I need to lighten that up a little bit. It's a little too dark. And then after that, I will gloss the eyes, and then I think we're pretty much ready to go on this one. So I'll be right back. This one is still a little wet, but this is kind of what it looks like on human eyes. You've got, you know, the whites of the eyes that are in there first, then you do the outline of the iris. You do the color inside the iris. I typically do a darker color on top, lighter color on bottom. Do your pupil. If you've got enough room, you do your little white highlight or light source dot. If you've got enough space, you can put a little kind of pink in the middle or, you know, towards the bridge of the nose. A lot of this is just touching up around the eyelids though. The eyeball itself is, in my opinion, not that bad. It depending on the space that you have to work with, if you follow the process, it's not terrible. But you need to make sure that after you do, like for instance, when you do the outline of the iris, you want to make sure that they're about the same size on both eyes. You don't want one really small, one really big, or something like that, or one way to the left and one way to the right, you know. So you want to make sure that they're symmetrical and then tighten up anything that you need to. And then when you're doing the inside, you know, make sure you leave a good ring around it. When you do the pupil, make sure that they're in the right spot. But a lot of it is just after you've done the eye, tightening up the eyelid on the top, on the bottom. Make sure your skin tones look nice to where they match. They're not like way off base. You don't want spots that are too dark or too light. You want to try to blend it together, which, you know, I could see right now there's areas here that I could have done a little bit better. There could do a little bit more blending here to where that's not such a harsh transition. There's a spot here where this could probably be a little bit lighter. So it just, I mean, there's, like I said, you could sit here and work on this forever. At some point you got to call it good enough and just kind of move on. But that's basically it. So here's, you know, once again, orc eyes, pretty basic. That would be a good place to start. If you're going to do human eyes, I would advise doing dark flesh tones at first because they are a little bit more forgiving as far as, you know, on the outline of the eye and stuff with shadows. But yeah, that's kind of it. I'll throw a couple pictures in here of some eyes that I've done. You've got, you know, some eyes like the Jesslyn heads that were done by Emil Wickman that are available at Wolf King Customs. They have really big eyes, and so they're a lot easier to paint eyeballs on. You've got there's a fire mage that I did. It's a gnome head that Walter DeMarco had sculpted for Wolf King Customs. And that one also has like really big eyes. And so that one's a lot easier to do. And then there's other ones that are a lot smaller, like God's Fire heads, especially the main crew of God's Fire. Sometimes they tend to have smaller eyes. You know, that's really more for kind of your advanced level, unless you're going to do, you know, you could do something really interesting. If you, let's say that you're not quite at the level where you're ready to do the pupils and irises and all that kind of stuff, you could do a God's Fire head that doesn't have as big eyes and then paint them like red or paint them white or do something spooky with them where you just kind of color the whole thing and you don't do an iris. So, you know, just because you've got a human head doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do normal human eyes. So do what you can with what you've got. And if there's anything that I can help with, let me know. But yeah, that's kind of how I do my eyes. So hopefully that helped you guys. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments and I will try to get to everyone that I can. So I will talk to you guys later, and remember, until next time, keep creating.